Good morning to Mashpee residents. My name is Willard. I am moderator for the Mashpee Men's Club. And today we're doing a Zoom session with our guest speaker, Andrew Gottlieb, because we are unable to use the Senior Center for our regular monthly meetings due to the COVID-19 crisis. So this broadcast will be sent out to community members and area members. And so we think this will be a valuable session for all concerned. Thank you, Andrew.
Great. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the Men's Club for your ongoing interest in the town's efforts to clean up its wastewater problem. So we spoke about a year ago, I believe, in anticipation of the town moving to town meeting with a proposal to construct our first wastewater treatment facility in town. And that meeting was a big success. Town meeting voted unanimously to proceed with the so-called phase one of our wastewater management program. I'll fill you in on where we're going with that. But a lot else has happened that has been helpful and productive during the course of the last 11 months since we've had the opportunity to speak. Phase one, as I mentioned, is proceeding. And just to remind people what phase one does is it authorized the construction of the first municipally owned wastewater treatment facility in the town of Mashpee at the transfer station site in the woods adjacent to the current transfer station, as well as the initial round of collection systems, traditionally referred to as sewers, in the area immediately adjacent to the transfer station, and then down along the east side of the Mashpee River, about halfway down from Route 28 along the east side of the river. And so where we are with that project is the final design and preparation of specifications suitable to go out to bid is ongoing. We anticipate going out to bid early in the spring of this year, and fully intend to break ground as early in calendar 22 as possible. We'll be constructing the treatment plant and the related sewers, and that build out program will last probably about 2 years to build the treatment plant and begin having sewers in the street that people can connect to. So while that work is ongoing, we are also actively looking at ways that we can encourage the community to take short-term steps that will have benefit to water quality. And so the form those have taken last year in the summer, the town manager at the Authorization Board of Selectmen sent a letter to all town property owners recommending the elimination of fertilizer use on lawn areas. The town has, led by example and has stopped the use of both Roundup on town facilities and fertilizer use on our fields. The use of fertilizer in residential and commercial settings adds nutrient load to the groundwater. It's a contributing factor to the long-term decline of our estuaries that we've seen, and it is also a significant contributor to some of the poor water quality that we've experienced the last couple of years in our major ponds, where we've had closures due to cyanobacteria blooms that potentially create toxic environment that required limitations on human contact and pet contact to those ponds. So that call to our homeowners and residences and businesses went out last year. We're renewing that. That ongoing effort to take nutrients out of the system wherever we can will be something that is a permanent and should be a permanent change in the town of Mashpee. So recognizing that a lot of people are currently making decisions on contracting with landscaping companies for the upcoming year now, we would encourage people to um, restrict the use of fertilizers, instruct your contractors not to fertilize your lawn. And in doing so, you'll be making a contribution to improving water quality and saving yourself a bit of money at the same time. Similarly, we continue to make investment in our shellfish program. Shellfish are an important part of our nitrogen mitigation program for Papaneset and Wacoit Bays. There will be additional expansion of our shellfish capability appearing on the town meeting warrant this spring. And, we'll be looking at making some additional investments to make sure that our Department of Natural Resources is capable of doing their share of the nutrient reduction program that we feel is necessary. The other major development over the course of the last year has been an acceleration of our so-called phase 2. And for those that, unlike me, may not have the various phases of the wastewater program at the tip of your tongue, let me just remind folks. Phase 1 was, what we authorized. It's a treatment plant and the core area around the treatment plant to benefit the water quality in the Mashpee River and the upper reaches of Papaneset Bay. We had 4 other phases in our nitrogen management program that progressively expanded our sewer system into the areas that were deemed most critical to improve water quality in the estuaries. We remain committed to meeting our nutrient management goals for our 2 main bays, Papaneset and Wacoit, but the town has also expanded its vision of what would be priority waters in phase 2 to include the watersheds of the 4 ponds, Johns, Shumet, Mashpee, Wakeby, and Santuit into phase 2. And so let me just share with folks an image of what we're talking about here. So what is on the table and is currently being considered by the Sewer Commission, and then upon recommendation later on this spring to the Board of Selectmen, is an accelerated and expanded phase 2. And so just by way of reviewing the bidding here, this is phase 1 here in the middle of the map. Treatment plan in the area around south of Quiniquisette Avenue down here. What we are proposing and evaluating right now, and the Sewer Commission has voted to move an article forward for the Board of Selectmen's consideration in the annual town meeting warrant this spring, is the so-called expanded phase 2. That would include this area down here, 2A, which is originally what was contemplated in our original phase 2, further work to benefit Shoestring Bay and all of Papaneset further down. So this area 2A would connect to the area currently being designed for construction later this year in phase 1, go up to the treatment plant. The new aspects of this really are the inclusion of 2B, which is up here between Mashpee Pond and Santuit Pond, 2C, which is the west side of Mashpee Pond up here, 2D, which is the northeast corner of the Santuit watershed stretching out into the town of Sandwich, and 2E, which was originally, again, part of the original part of phase 2 that would capture wastewater in the Johns Pond and the Shumet watersheds. And the reason for these proposed expansions is we've recognized that the freshwater ponds are similarly impacted by nutrients as our estuaries are, but the nutrient of concern is more phosphorus than nitrogen. Phosphorus tends to drive ecological conditions in freshwater environments, whereas nitrogen tends to be the driver in the estuaries. And the only effective means of limiting phosphorus in wastewater in today's world is sewer. There are not effective means through septic system controls that would reduce phosphorus loads into the groundwater, which then feeds the ponds in septic systems. And so we are currently looking at expanding the sewer systems to these areas. We get a double benefit out of approaching our wastewater management this way, because these areas around the ponds that are being considered for sewering also contribute nitrogen to our estuaries. Everything that flows into the groundwater, into Mashpee Pond, into Santuit Pond, flows eventually through the groundwater to Shoestring Bay, to Papaneset Bay, over time, and with great speed through the discharge down the Mashpee River and the Santuit River, with a day's time of travel to Shoestring Bay and to the Mashpee River through the Mashpee and Santuit rivers. And so we get the benefit of phosphorus control that benefits the ponds as ecological resources worthy of protection, and we get the nitrogen reduction to the bays. And so the nitrogen reduction through this revised phase 2 actually meets our target reductions for Papaneset Bay. We're not sacrificing anything in terms of the protection of Papaneset Bay, while getting the additional public benefit of cleaner water in the freshwater ponds. So it's actually a better investment of the single public dollar for 2 ecological benefits than what the original phase plan, which was focused exclusively on estuaries, would achieve. As it relates to the Wacoit Bay watershed, the nitrogen load from the areas around Shumet and Johns Pond, again through groundwater and the Quashnet and Childs River, make their way into the Wacoit Bay system. So there's a multiple benefit here as well. What we have not yet resolved as it relates to this area 2E is whether the wastewater is going to go to a facility that exists on Joint Base Cape Cod, whether we're going to build a facility on Back Road up in here as the plan originally contemplated, or whether we're going to take this wastewater and pipe it down 151 effectively to our existing treatment plant. We're still working those things out. And there are costs and benefits and arguments to be made for any one of those 3 scenarios that we're currently evaluating. We do know that should we bring residual nitrogen from 2E over to the treatment plant here, it will require us to do a little bit more sewering in the Papaneset watershed to offset that load that's being transported from the Wacoit watershed to the Papaneset watershed. That said, it doesn't look like a big deal. And so we're evaluating all these things. So where we are right now with this phase 2 is the Sewer Commission has, as I said, has voted to request the Board of Selectmen to put an article on town meeting warrant to do the initial design of this expanded phase. We don't know yet what the estimated cost of a phase 2 would be. It will be substantial. It's a much bigger sewer footprint than phase 1. And so we know it's going to be a substantial investment. It's an investment that needs to happen. And we will likely look at, if town meeting approves it, doing just enough design to get a rough cost estimate of what the overall program would cost. We would then go back to the Sewer Commission, to the Board of Selectmen for discussion about whether the estimated cost is an achievable number that we're willing to put before the voters. And we will either authorize a full design of the system at that point, or a more limited design based upon what we think the community should be asked to consider financing. The aggressive goal is to go to town meeting in the spring of 22 for design funds, pursue state financing in the summer of 22 and be able to go to town meeting for construction authorization funding in the spring of 23. That may be aggressive. It's possible that this whole scenario, even with design starting in spring of 22, may not go before the voters in May of 23. It may slide into 24. That remains to be seen. It's a big bite of the apple, but we think that there's a lot of concern and support around cleaning up our waters. There is also, thanks to the federal infrastructure bill that passed recently, a substantial infusion of federal funds to towns like Mashpee that advance infrastructure projects like this. And so there is a increased sense of urgency within Town Hall to take advantage of and put ourselves in the position to maximize the amount of federal money that will come to Mashpee, and getting a project on the table as quickly as possible gives us the best chance of bringing that money to Mashpee. And so in some respects, moving quickly with a big project will actually result in that project costing the town less money than it would if we phase it in over time, because this federal infusion of money is time limited. And so the initial sticker price of this project may be something that is big enough that gets people's attention, but the actual cost to us as a community will be substantially less. When we talked last year, one of the things that our financing plan relied upon was an expectation, not yet realized, but strongly held, that something called the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust Fund would come forward and provide up to a 25% subsidy in the cost of the project. We had reason to believe that that trust fund that had been created a couple of years prior would fulfill that promise, but it was not guaranteed. In the time since we've last spoken, in fact, that promise became reality. The town was awarded 25% of its $54 million cost of construction of phase one. Some $17 million came from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust to lower the town's cost of borrowing. And that trust fund established rules and regulations that promise future projects on the Cape that are successful in obtaining state financing, which ours are in a good position to achieve, 25% cost reduction going forward. So we already know that whatever the initial sticker price of a project going forward, 25% of it's going to be paid by somebody other than Mashpee taxpayers. The federal money that's coming down the road from the infrastructure bill will also include some additional principal forgiveness or grants that will further reduce the cost of the project to our taxpayers. It's not yet clear what the rules around allocating that $1.1 billion in federal infrastructure money for clean water that came to Massachusetts are going to be, but we have every reason to believe that they will add to that 25% principal forgiveness, and again, put us in a very advantageous position to do what will be a big and expensive project going forward. So what you're experiencing and what you'll begin to hear from the Board of Selectmen, I believe, going forward, is a desire to go big on the next phase of this project, because we realize we've got big problems we need to solve, and you don't solve big problems with small solutions. And a recognition that there's a 5-year window to move projects forward where we can optimize money coming from places other than the Mashpee tax base to pay for these projects. And I think that the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, the sewer commission have all demonstrated a real commitment to an ability to lower the cost of these projects to the taxpayers to the greatest extent possible, And part of that strategy right now is moving faster rather than moving slower. So that's where we're going this spring. We're going to be asking and educating the voters in Mashpee about a lot in a relatively short period of time. But we're really keeping our eye on the ball on doing the things we need to do to achieve water quality improvements in a timely manner, but also do it in the most cost-effective way possible for our residents. So, a lot going on, I would say. A lot of it's very positive, and builds on the momentum that we've received from a unanimous vote back in the spring of 21 from town meeting. That sent a very clear message to us as municipal leaders that that the townspeople want and expect us to move forward on meaningful improvement of our water quality, and that is the path we are moving down. I'll remind folks, starting from scratch is hard, and we have an aggressive program. None of us have built a sewer system before. We've gotten some very good staff support from our new town engineer, Chris Gallagher, who's provided us some invaluable guidance in helping refine the design of what was authorized in a way that improved its cost effectiveness and hopefully help us manage the cost. So we're figuring it all out as we go, people are working. It may seem like not that much has happened since over the course of the last several months, but in fact, a lot has been happening. It's just been happening at the detail level that is necessary to make sure that when you launch something, it launches smoothly and effectively, and it will continue to be able to deliver a value to the taxpayers of the town for the investment they've entrusted us with moving forward. So that's what I think people can expect, going forward on, expansion. You'll begin once we have bid specifications and a construction schedule. We are committed to making sure that there's good public awareness of and notice of where construction activities are going to be taking place. Once you start digging up streets, it has impacts on traffic flow. We've learned a lot of good lessons from some of our neighboring communities who have managed projects like this on effective tools and procedures to let people know what type of notice people are responsive to and that works for them, and we will continue to work on that issue going forward. Some other things that I think are happening that remain positive, that people should be aware of. We've talked a bit about sewer connection from your house to the street to the public sewer are a private cost that is borne by the individual homeowner. The range of costs is wide based on a couple of factors, but the biggest one, how far set back your house is from the sewer pipe. If you've got a long driveway and a long yard, you're gonna have a longer connection. If it happens to be uphill, it needs a lift pump, and that drives the cost. The town has decided in phase one to provide the so-called grinder pumps, lift pumps, to homeowners who need them as a way to manage the impact of cost on connecting to individual homeowners. I expect that we will continue that as we move forward. It's a relatively small cost to the community in the aggregate, but it relieves a major burden from the homeowners who happen to live at low points and have to lift their wastewater up into the public sewer. So that's one method that we've adopted to move forward. The other is that we talked about this as a possibility last year. and it's become more and more likely that the county is going to make a zero interest program available to homeowners, especially homeowners at or around the median income of the Cape, perhaps somewhat above, of a zero interest loan program to cover the cost of sewer connections. And if that program comes to pass, I was just on a call with the county commissioners before we take this, where they voted to move forward with exactly such a proposal and seek that money from the state. That will provide an important tool for homeowners who over the next 5 to 7 years are going to have to look at connecting to a sewer, and will provide you with the opportunity and access to obtain a no credit check based 0 or 2% loan, depending on your income bracket, to help defray the cost of connection. So that's another important way that the towns have been working with the county, who've been working with the state, to make this all easier and more affordable for people. And these loans, as I said, would be no credit check. They'd be allowed to be spread out over 20 years and dealt with as effectively as a betterment to people's property. Again, it's an important tool that we all recognize needs to be developed in order to help people make the connections and obtain the benefit that we're hoping to by having as many people connect to sewers as possible. So there's a lot of good happening out there in the financial world that'll mitigate the cost of this to individuals. We know, how it works in terms of impacting people's, taxes, and also the out-of-pocket costs, and we're working aggressively to mitigate and manage both of those potential impacts to the extent we can for the greatest number of people, and certainly focusing on those who are stressed economically by rising housing prices and other cost of living impacts that people are experiencing everywhere, but seem even more acute locally on Cape Cod, given some of our unique geography and economy. So with that, I guess we've gone about the half hour. I'm happy to stop, and Bruce or Berkeley, if you have any questions you want to put out there that I haven't addressed, I'm happy to try and answer those.
Andrew, I was very much impressed with the tool to show us about the complexities of this project. Certainly, it would be challenging, but I have been very encouraged as a Mashpee resident by your report to know that we're on track, aggressively pursuing the funding, especially if we have a window to access the federal funding from the Biden plan as well too. So I'm very encouraged by what your message is today. We're on track.
We are on track. We have a lot of work left to do, but I think that the Board of Selectmen clearly has its eye on the ball, and feels that we can fulfill the promises we've made to take steps necessary to improve our water quality, and not lose sight of the impact of these projects on people's personal finances.